Are you an aspiring or struggling author, speaker, coach, or helping professional who wonders why it's so damn hard to complete those passion projects or take your business to the next level? Welcome to Sips of Story and Sanity, the podcast where we dig for the stories behind the stories of those who have navigated the creative process successfully so that you can discover that you're not alone, stop beating yourself up, and start adapting strategies that will help you change the world without losing your sanity or your soul. Tune into our first episode today to meet me, Amanda Johnson, founder of True to Intention, and the team that has gathered around me to support creatives and coaches as we all work together to heal our personal and collective stories. You'll hear my own story behind my story of growing a heart-based business and writing a book in less than 3 weeks. And hopefully, you'll be deeply inspired by some of the magic and messes that have led to the development of this podcast and our upcoming book, You Can't Make This Story Up. So grab a cup of something delicious and sip on some story and sanity with us. What if story is the answer to our crises of meaning and belonging, to our impulse to heal our lives and help others, to our desire and drive to leave this world better than we found it? Now, we love good stories. In fact, we're kind of obsessed, not just with the stories themselves, but with the stories behind the stories. Their oddly perfect timing, the healing process they provoke in their authors, and their capacity to catalyze individual and collective change. And we love exploring these with writers, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, healers, parents, and others. Tune in to hear these stories behind the stories and entertain with us the real possibility that whether you are a teller or a consumer, story is always offering or leading us to an answer. Hello and welcome to the first episode of Sips of Story and Sanity, the stories behind the stories. This is a place where we talk to authors, speakers, thought leaders, parents, and more. But before we get to talk to all of those awesome folks, I thought it was important for you to get to know us first and kind of understand what's driving the development of this experience as a team and as a podcast. So for me, I'm Amanda Johnson, founder of True to Intention. And for the last, almost 15 years, I've been helping aspiring authors, speakers, and coaches figure out how to get their messages onto pages and stages in a really true to intention way. And that means that the stories that are behind their stories that they want to tell have to be at least made visible and hopefully processed and healed before they get into a space where they're supporting others with their message. And so along the way, in the beginning, I was doing it a lot of it by myself with the help of amazing coaches. But almost immediately as I began the journey, clients started to show up that were obviously intended to be more than clients. We became fast friends, and now we have not just clients turned friends, turned team members, but some of my family members have joined the team as well. So I'm really excited to have them introduce themselves today, and then they're going to put me on the hot seat because we figured since I'm the one who had this crazy idea for the podcast and get to do deep dive interviews with every single one of them coming up soon, it was only fair that they got to interview me first. So I'll turn it over to Alyssa, because Alyssa, you were the first one to meet me of all of these folks.
Yeah, actually, I was hoping you would share that story and we'd hear it from your perspective, because I always love hearing it from your perspective. And then I can go from there.
All right. Well, Alyssa is my youngest sister. younger than me by 16 years, just about. And so when she came into the world, my mom had to work and my dad was super busy. And so I was like mama by proxy. So we spent a lot of time together for her first year. And then, of course, because I was so much older, I left home and we were separated, and it was hard for a few years. And then eventually, some of the work that I was doing brought us back together, and she's kind of been with me since, helping from admin stuff and sorting through big, huge stacks of paperwork and file cabinets, all the way to now today she's helping out in retreats and helping with the stories that we're working on, as she's a very gifted writer and adds all of these incredible skills to our community. So how about that?
That
Is that the
works. Yeah.
story?
No, I was actually remembering the story. No, it was a great introduction. I was remembering the story of that I played in your personal story when I was a baby. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, so two pivotal moments kind of come to mind about how I got roped into all of the fun at True to Intention. I like you said, I started, doing the admin for you and some assistant work when I was probably, I think 15. Yeah, my first job. And did that for a couple of years. And then I had gotten, through one of your connections, through your business, I had gotten an internship with a design and marketing company. And I remember I was there for probably 6 to 8 months, somewhere around there. And you had this new author that you were working with in San Diego. And he wanted me to, you're like, come on down. She's going to need support with design and media and all this stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay. Thinking I was going to, in representation of the company I was working with. And we're there at this beautiful estate overlooking, the ocean, and having this conversation with this very successful and impressive woman. And she goes to the bathroom real quick, and very subtly told me not to mention anything about the company I was working with, that I was there to represent myself and my business. And I was like, what business are you talking about? And I don't have a business. And you're like, yeah, well, you don't today, but you will tomorrow. And I just kind of gulped and was like, oh, okay, no idea what you're talking about, but sure, sis. And yeah, the next month with your support, I started my own business and left that firm with a great connection and relationships, and was able to take some clients with me. And that was the first time I think you threw me in the deep end. And then the second time was about a month later, when we were at a networking event in New York, and you started I was introducing myself to someone, and you chimed in and were like, oh yeah, and she's writing a book too. And I just remember kicking you under the table. Like, what in the world are you, what are you telling people? No one is writing a book here. And then by the end of that week, I'm pretty sure we had the book entirely mapped out and planned to launch that same month a year later, which we did successfully. So I've had the fortunate opportunity to work with you in so many capacities, from supporting you alongside True to Intention to actually becoming a True to Intention client, and now being able to run alongside and work with all your other clients and support the growth and expansion along the way. And it's really awesome. So very fortunate for all the deep ends that you threw me in. And
well, that's not me, right? Those things just come out of my mouth.
It never is.
Almost without me having any control over them. Almost.
Right.
It's true.
Right. It never is. That's okay. That's how we run here. No, it's fine. It's
she would have saved you if you were drowning.
She would have. Yeah. No, it was good practice. So I'm grateful for it. It's been it's been a nice journey since. I think it's been almost like 6 or 7 years now that we've really been working together professionally. And so, you said new program, I said yay. I said new department, you said let's go. And then you said podcast, and we were like, okay, we're making it happen. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And so that means that Aaron is the next one. I was like, oh yeah, let's see what's the order here. Aaron,
Hmm.
you were the next one to meet me.
I was. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So for my whole life, I've known you for sure. And thinking about the journey, I had absolutely no choice. You threw me in the deep end just by birthing me. And I'm happy about it. That's not me complaining whatsoever. From when I was a little kid, all the way from Blue's Clues to Harry Potter to whatever else we're watching now. You were always there, guiding me along, showing me stories and asking me questions about them. And you definitely programmed me to be a story junkie. And that's absolutely what I am. And I don't know, since I was, I don't know, just about when I hit teenager, I started doing some odd jobs for you, just doing a bunch of stuff, some clients, I dabbled that way. I always came to your events. Sometimes I came to your retreats. And then I just kind of stopped doing that for a while because I started doing high school, but still on the side a little bit. And then started my own business, and then joined this team and started doing this. And that's why I'm here at the intersection of on the team and story junkie, and knowing your clients and loving your clients. That's all part of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here in all the ways. And I think it's important for people to know what your business is at this point, because, like Alyssa was talking about, her what she offers to the team with her storytelling and with her graphic design. She's doing our book covers and websites and things. And so for you, what is your space besides just like rushing in here to help mom when she's paralyzed with technology?
Right.
Besides that, what's next?
Right. Yeah. So my nickname on the team is Tech Elf, and that should pretty much say most of it. I handle most of the system stuff for the team, and kind of so does my business. It's a lot of consulting and project management for projects, and mostly to do with tech and online services.
Right. So you've been helping us develop communities. Like you're the one who kind of put together Cocoon You and have put together some of the online communities that some of our clients are enjoying right now and using to change the world. So
that's right.
Yeah. All right, Teddy, you're next.
So I was at Amanda's first Jumpstart Your Book retreat, and I came along with my boss who was going to it, and she wanted me to come with her, and so I jumped in. I've always wanted to write a book, but I jumped in not knowing really what I was getting into.
It was a deep end. Yay.
I jumped into the deep end. Yes. So it turned out everybody was writing their stories. I was writing a fiction book, had written a fiction book. And so I felt out of place. I had been triggered, but she had warned about that. And I was a mess. I was really a mess there. And I couldn't talk. I'd lost my ability to speak. I was so triggered. My brain wasn't working. I wasn't doing the exercises. the last day, I ended up on the floor sobbing in front of everybody as strangers. Yeah, it was interesting. And then
I can't wait till you tell the full story in your interview.
but I was also at the same time had witnessed, makes me want to cry. I had witnessed incredible things that happened as people went through the process and told their stories. And I wanted to go back because I hadn't been able to absorb all that and do the exercises. So I volunteered. I said, I noticed that you were by yourself and you needed a lot of things. Can I come the next time and just serve you and make sure you have everything you need so you can focus on what you're doing? And she said, yeah. So I did that, and I went through on the sidelines. I went through the exercises and came up with what I was going to write at the end. And then she triggered me again. Oh, where's your story? This is great information, but where's your story? What's this lady in her story bit? Anyway, I went to every retreat because I was so watching the transformation and watching the story emerge and watching the branding emerge and watching all that. I was totally enthralled and fascinated by that. And I jumped into when she did a launch your book, do your book, I jumped into that. Everything she launched, I jumped into it because I was really fascinated with it and loved the process. And so I was her first retreat challenge.
Opportunity,
and then I was,
blessing, gift.
And I was her first book production challenge. Oh my gosh. I after it was all over, when the book was launched and we did everything, I was really amazed every time my phone rang and it was her. I just didn't think she was ever gonna like me. Like I hardly liked myself with all that I went through. But anyway, she didn't throw me to the curb, and thank God.
No.
Anyway, so over the years we developed a really good relationship, and I have just been true to intention junkie, I guess, and became just kind of fell into when she needed a reader reading, and so I ended up reading a good portion of the books that have gone through True to Intention. And boy, what a blessing that's been, just being a reader and helping, then starting to do the editing. And yeah, it's been fun. It's been so when this team got put together, I was already a part of it. I already was saying we when it came to True Intention. I'd ask her a question, say, what are we planning on doing? When are we, so when she made this team official, I'm like, I've already been a part of it for years now. So yeah, I'm the official.
More than a decade now. Amazing. Time flies. And I'm so glad you're here, and I can't wait till people hear the down and dirty behind the story for you, because there's some really big stuff that you've worked on and healed in this community, and it's been a blessing to witness it. So that leaves Lori.
I think that it was 2013, I believe, that I was involved with another program and was doing some healing work, some self-help work, and we had a mutual friend in Phil. And Phil was one of the life coaches, and he was amazing. And on my goals sheet for that year, as we were writing down long-term and short-term goals, I wanted to complete a half marathon. And I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, and I wanted to write a book. Like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? Okay, don't know. I mean, like, I had always wanted to write a children's story. I mean, I thought for, oh gosh, since I was 9 or 10, I used to love to just make up stories and write them down. Then there's a story behind that story that we won't go into today, but I kind of got put on the side burner. And so I hadn't really thought about it for, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years. And yeah, so Phil saw that on my sheet, and we discussed it a little bit. And I'm not really sure how to start. He gave me some pointers and some ideas and some people to talk to. And then there were some others in our group that I think there were like 2 others that were thinking about writing a book too, and one gal that had already written a book, co-authored a book. And I think he met up with you and said, "Hey, I've got this, group of people. I'd like you to come and meet." It was via telephone, and so it was a conference call. And I listened to your story, and it was like the windows of heaven opened, and God said, "There you go." This is who you've been waiting for. And Teddy, you and I both gonna get emotional, I guess, this morning. It was like I just knew I had to reach out to you, and I had to share what I was working on. And you were so gracious and so kind when we talked after you read my transcript, that what I had written. And I instantly felt your love and your friendship, and was so excited to work with you. There were a lot of things that transpired that I wasn't real sure. Like,
and then she tore your story apart.
Yeah. What have I got myself into? I thought she liked me. But no, there has been a lot of healing and a lot of a lot of going back through the story and trying to add more detail and all those fun things. But we just clicked, and I started helping you out with some retreats and things, and coming in a day early, and doing
on
some
purpose
of that
and
work.
on accident.
And on accident and purpose, yes. Well, we had some dates mixed up, I think, initially. And so when we figured out I was coming in a day early and flights had already been scheduled, she was very gracious and said, "Well, just come and stay with me." So I did, and that ended up being a really good thing, I think, for her. Some things that went on there that I was able to help with, so that's awesome. And I think that was kind of my first little intro into hey, I kind of like this retreat thing, and I like helping Amanda get these things set up, and one thing led to another. And I had already been reading stories for some of your authors, and doing some editing and some things that way. So I think it was a perfect fit. It just all kind of fell into place as it should have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important too that people understand that I never would have pulled together a team if it was up to me. I would have just been doing it by myself. So it doesn't surprise me that through DNA and family relationship and sharing and connection, and through friendship and, hey, can you read this because your story reminds me of the stories that this person is trying to communicate with, and just, can I get some feedback? Like the team kind of formed itself for me, which is great, because like I said, I leadership has never been something that I really was like super excited to do. Because it's messy. It is so messy. And I feel like life is already messy enough. It's already messy enough to, work with clients and have all of our story collisions. It's like, wow, let's add another layer of team. And oh, let's make that like team and family members. That makes it even more fun. Like I wouldn't have designed it this way, but it's perfection. And so I'm really glad that all of you were inserted into my storyline at just the right time and have all um, been thrown into the deep ends with me and chosen to keep treading even when it's hard. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for being part of this podcast. This is something that I'm really excited to do with you, because I think that there are a lot of people who say that they want to change the world, and they really, really do. And they get absolutely positively stuck and they have no idea why. And instead of having the opportunity to hang out with people who've been in that space and who have figured out what it was that was blocking them, they do the most horrible things to themselves. They shame themselves every time the year ends and they don't have the project done. They call themselves terrible names, right? Like, because these projects aren't done and they feel like their calling isn't complete. And so, for me, my hope and prayer for this is that people will begin to understand what it really means to be a creative, what it really means to be a messenger, that this isn't something like what is so often promoted in social media and all of those conferences, where it's like all you have to do is like, no, those might be the things that need to be done, but what it takes internally to get to the point where you can do those things, that's what all of you have done over the last several years of, that internal work that has to get done before the message can be embodied and delivered powerfully. So I'm excited that people are going to be able to hear the stories behind the stories and hopefully breathe a sigh of damn relief that they are not alone, that they're not just like, there's nothing wrong with them. In fact, it's perfect. And if they can just lean in and listen for the message that's trying to get to them through their own message or their own story, then magic happens in the mess. So thanks for being here. And I'm going to say all of that right before you all put me on the hot spot with your questions to interview me. Of course, look, she's all excited.
She's
Look
ready.
at that
Alyssa
face.
is ready.
It's time to fire. It's fire time. Okay. Well, I think that I want to ask the first question that everyone is probably, who's listening is probably thinking, which is, you mentioned clients, you mentioned friends, you mentioned family, all in one community, all in one professional working community where stories are happening, story collisions are happening, and healing is happening, and people being faced with all of this this stuff they got to work through. So I'm curious how that, take a few sips.
Gulp,
A few sips.
gulp, wait, no, I need my sips of story and
Gulp.
sanity. Hang on, gulp.
No, I think it's important for people to hear a little bit about how that juggling all of those different dynamics are for you, and how you process all of that.
It's messy. It's super messy. I just have to get used to the mess and learning to love it and look for the magic in it. Because, so many years, really from the beginning, like, how can you listen to somebody's story in a retreat and not develop the deepest bonds with them, right? Like, they are taking a chance to reveal their internal world, sometimes for the very first time. I hear stories of abuse, I hear stories of neglect, I hear stories, like, the stuff that people share in those spaces is so sacred. And I've had a lot of people over the years be like, you're too close to your clients, and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to not be close. Like, they're sharing their deepest stuff with me. And if I pull away, then everything that they were scared was going to happen, if they ever told that story, happens, and I can't be part of it. And so I have really had to figure out like how to navigate being a coach, being a friend. And, you know, a lot of it is just really good communication of like, you know, so what role do you want me in right now? Right? Like, so you're sharing this story, and what do you need from me? Do you need the coach who asks questions, or do you need the friend who just listens and is like, wow, that freaking sucks? Like, tell me what you need right now. And then everyone learns, right? Because half the time, that's the reason why we're still all bunched up in our stories, is because none of us knew how to ask for what we needed. And so, you know, part of it is just being remembering for me to ask those questions and say, what's the role that you want me in right now? What do you need, and how can I support you? And then doing my best to support that. It does get tricky, especially as we're working and we're growing this year. God, we have so many new projects that we've done. I mean, we did Oracle decks, and we've got rebrands happening, and working with a publishing company for the first time on a launch, and it's just a lot, right? And so one of the things that is probably the trickiest for me is that my clients, I'm notorious for overworking and always being available. And I say notorious because it's one of the things that I love the most. And it's also one of those like shadowy things that I have to do. I have to be careful of for myself so that I'm not like working around the clock, because I love my work and my clients so much. And so, you know, really getting to that point of like recognizing, oh, my clients are really used to like response, right? And so now what happens is we have a team that's working on not just projects for this team, but projects for other teams, right? And so I think that's probably been the trickiest for me, is trying to have the communication flow all the way, and make sure that we're all on the same page, on the right track, on the same timeline, and all of that, and really having to let go of the way that I did it by myself, and recognize that in the expansion, I need to create different expectations and manage it differently. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And so that's something new for you too, right? Not doing everything on your own. Like how long have you been doing everything on your own, and now you're delegating and
My
working with
entire
other
life.
people?
My entire life. Yeah. I mean, I've had opportunities in different you know, jobs that I had, and different roles that I had as I was in training, to learn how to delegate and learn how to keep people accountable and keep things on track. So I know how to. It's just different to be in that role every day instead of being the doer, you know. Instead of doing it all, I'm like, is this getting done? It's another layer of intentionality. So, and also just making sure that, you know, for me, when we have a company that really is all about people being their most real selves and telling their truest stories and doing the healing work, it's incredibly important that that culture is part of our culture as a team. You know, that I mean, when I'm by myself and I'm getting stuff done, and I have clients who call me this like a machine, right? Like I just move, I just get it done. And for years, as I was in training programs and having to manage other people and stuff, I had to learn to say, this is focus. This doesn't mean I don't like you. Like, right? Like this really intense look on my face is like, oh yeah, people, right? Because I get into that mode of getting things done, and then I got to remember the human part of it. And so having team at this time is perfect, because I'm right in the middle of shifting that story from feeling like the machine that makes everyone else's stuff move into the human that gets to stay ever present to the relationships that are happening right in front of me, and to make sure that that is and stays at the heart of all of our transactions, that the relationship is felt, no matter how busy we are and no matter how many deadlines we are trying to meet, and all of that, and to preserve the other types of relationship, right? Like, it's not just team, it's family, it's friendship, it's like doing all of those check-ins on all of those levels.
So what's the story behind you realizing that you needed a team? Like, what was the moment that you realized that you
Oh
couldn't
my
do it anymore?
gosh.
Yeah, I know. Take a sip.
What were the
Take a
moments?
sip. Right.
Or the moments.
Well-
Can we have a timeline? I'll draw it.
Okay, draw the timeline. Okay, so
that gulp was a moment. It was a
it was-
moment.
well, I mean, you all know Ursula, and she's been pushing for team since the beginning, because she knew that that the work would have a ceiling without team, because there's only one me and there's only so much I can do. And so over the years, I have had team members. I have had people who've helped me with tech. I've had personal assistants. I've had, I've worked with team with regards to like, we have manuscripts done. Who knew that was going to happen? Now what do we need? We need people who know how to do design and people who know how to do this production thing. And so I was fortunate enough that I had all these people in my space. Whenever the need was there, I looked up and they were there, and they were good people, which is awesome. And so, being able to pull teams together for programs, I've done for the last 10 years. When it comes to business expansion, yeah, I just didn't ever see it expanding. But this year at the beginning, Ursula, again, it's all her fault.
God, Ursula, making us better.
Go, Ursula.
Yeah, we were doing some sessions early this year, and she was like, Amanda, don't you feel like it's time? Like, you're talking about all these things that you want to do. I just don't know. Like, you could do it all yourself, but why would you? And all of these needs that are coming up in your community, people need this and people need that. And so I would try to find someone, and most of the time, like I'd say 90% of the time, I found the absolute perfect person who could, consult or be a part of this project and help us move this forward, and then just do that again whenever we needed it. But there were some things that especially marketing, right? Like, the marketing piece for our people, hands down, like, our clients are like, we hate marketing. We hate being visible. We don't like social media, right? Like, and so we look at them and we're thinking, well, okay, all the formulas that are out there to help people move business and grow business and get visibility are just not, they don't work for our folks. And yet our folks are geniuses when it comes to people. Like, they're so good offline. So why are we trying to have them feel like they got to be online all the time? Like, I'm so tired of those formulas. So, looking at how do we do this in a way that is 100% authentic? And when I look out there and I think, wow, I can't find someone who thinks this way, who can wrap their head around and deliver a solution that is really a good match for the client, then that's when I'm calling one of you and being like, okay, we got to figure this out. We cannot I can't keep sending them to people who tell them that they're doing it all wrong, when I know, not being a marketing strategist, that all they got to do is call 5 of their friends from their previous lifetime and things will start to move. So yeah, it's been, it's like, I also am really clear that there's some parts I just don't want to do anymore. Like, I love the deep end work. Put me in retreats, put me in the deep end of content, helping people to see their stories. And, we're working on fiction this year for the first time. That's super fun. But there's a whole lot of my business that I'm just like, I never wanted to do. And so I'm really happy to offload those things.
Yeah, you need an assistant.
Yeah. My assistant.
Did you just say that you love deep end work? That just doesn't make any sense. with anyone's stories from earlier on this episode.
No, I love that's my favorite part. It's like seeing because how many of the people who come through this community that you've seen over the years, they come in with these big dreams of like, I'm gonna go be the speaker on this stage, I'm gonna go change the world with this and change the world with that, and then they slam into a horrible story and they do a bunch of healing work around that story, and then their life looks completely different and they're super happy with it. Like that big dream that they had, I think, was just like a dream that our co-author inserted into their dream life to say, hey, go do this so that you'll actually face your story. And then they face their story and then they go back and do things that they never could, they thought they'd lost forever. People going back to ministry after swearing it off, people like realizing that being a mom and taking kids around the world and showing them the absolute most important things about life was way more important than pushing a message out at this time, right? Like those types of things. That's the freedom that I'm about. So not the normal freedom cells that you hear out there.
Something you said there, you mentioned the co-author. What do you mean when you say that? Because I think a lot of people, especially newer people listening, won't know, although everyone in the community will. But
thank you for that, Aaron. He's my word guy. So when I talk about co-author, when I started this whole business, you see the logo, it's my butterfly, right? So for me, it was all about looking at this butterfly framework and looking at this inspiration that is already inside of us and that emerges, and we have all the things in our environment like a caterpillar does, and then we go upside down. That's the time where everyone slams into their story, and most of us just resist that because it's extremely hard and painful.
Sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. Resistance is kind of a joke, right? You kind of know that if you're ever going to get that thing done, you got to figure out how to create a cocoon and get safe and dissolve all of that junk.
Become goop.
Yeah, become goop. Like let go of all of those identities. You weren't destined to be a caterpillar. You were destined to be a butterfly. And then you got to come out of that cocoon at just the right time, when strengthen your wings and trust the wind. And so for many, many years in my business, I would use the wind as the metaphor, as the personification, let's say, of God or the universe. Like in this community, we have so many different belief systems and religious views and spiritual experiences that for me, the wind was like one of those kind of universal terms that was safe, right? Because it's something that everyone kind of understands. It's connected to the butterfly framework. And so since I was using the butterfly framework, there was this other thing that happened as I realized I was working with people through this process of looking at their stories. And there was this other framework that emerged. And that's why I'm using co-author now, because what I realized was that the wind and the butterfly is a really, really powerful metaphor. And a lot of people here still use it. I still use it in a bunch of my training. And when we're talking about story healing, there's this experience that I watch clients go through, which is, the first thing I always ask them is, I need more detail about that story. And they're like, I don't want to do that, right? Because they don't want to be the character in their story again. But that's what I'm asking them to do, is to go back there and what were you thinking and what were you feeling and how was your body reacting? And they're like, I hate you. Why did I hire you? And I'm like, you're not going to be the character forever. But one of the things that I realize is that most of us are narrating our lives, right? We tell stories about what happened to us rather than like showing stories and bringing people into stories to have them experience them with us. And that's the way to create engaging storytelling on the page or on the stage. But in order to do that, you have to have processed enough of it that it doesn't take you down or give you a headache when you're trying to write or spin you out while you're talking to people. And so what I found is that I'd take people through this process where I'd ask them to be the character, and then I'd pop them up and be like, okay, so you had this experience and this experience and this experience, which you've seen from the inside. Now I want you to look at it from above. And they start to narrate what happened in between. And as they move between this character and this narrator and this character and this narrator, something happens towards the end of their project where they get the opportunity. This is how it goes. Oh my gosh, Amanda, remember that thing that was going on in my life? Yes. Doesn't that remind you of the last 7 times that I wrote about that in my story? And I would always say this thing. And so they start to see how they, as a character, have been moving, they've been keeping themselves stuck in a loop. And once they see that loop happening in the moment of like, oh, this is one of those moments where a person says this and I normally say that. And I'm going to go, what's my new script? And so for me, that's the point where we become co-authors. So co-author, we're working with God or the universe or however people want to name that force that seems to be inserting people in our storylines at just the right time and kind of moving our stories forward.
So I think as I listen to you say all that, I think it'll be really interesting for listeners to hear how you got to this point. Like, what did True to Intention start as years ago, and how has it come this far and evolved into that deeper work that you do with people?
It didn't take long. I really, really, really thought that I was just helping people write good content. Like, I just wanted them to stop being by themselves when they were on their way for a rabbit trail, or they were going to get lost, and then I was going to have to cut a bunch of pages and they were going to hate my guts. Like, from the beginning, if I could just help them from the beginning to get a strong outline, to see all the stories and lessons and where they belong and the tools and the research, if they wanted to include that, then I could help them keep that true. But then Teddy happened at my first retreat. And when she was, on the floor in tears after an enormous breakthrough, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room, I realized, I literally heard a voice say, True to Intention is not about the messages, it's about the messengers. The people who are coming to you have, the idea to go change the world is the inspiration to reconnect with what they're here to do and who they really are. But there are all of these nasty stories that have been put on them, all of these limiting beliefs, all of these things that are keeping them from being who they really are. So the process of working through story allows people to face all of that, which is why a lot of people never finish, right? A lot of people want to write books, a lot of people want to change the world, and it's a very small percentage that actually move these things into being. And so very quickly, I realized that it was more about the messenger than the message. And, and then as far as the other programs and things, we would help them finish their books, and then they needed publishing and production, and then they needed talks that were aligned and congruent with what they were writing and the same voice, instead of, mimicking one of the people that they really thought was cool. Nah, do it yourself. This is how to do it yourself and be true. Curriculum needed to be written because they wanted to do events and online trainings. And so, we started to do all of those things. But the heart of people being here to feel safe enough to do the healing work is the one consistent thing across time. Is, why are we really stuck with this project right now? Because it's really not about that word. Stop changing that word a million times. There's something else going on, right? What else is that? So yeah, and truly, in the beginning, I would work with a lot of people who weren't really up to ready wanting that. And now I'm just really clear from the very beginning that if you're going to be in this space, you're going to slam into your story. So, if you're okay with that, we want you here. And if you're not, it's probably better for you to go look somewhere else for someone else to help you get that done, because I can't help it. Like, it's who I am. I'm just gonna, even when I had a part-time job at Whole Foods, I would be in a line and people would be walking through. I'd be doing cashier work and people would be walking through and they would be telling me their story, and my managers would be like, this never happens to anyone else. I'm like, I know. It's like an invisible sign on my head that says, tell me your story and feel better.
Yeah, and so in the process of that evolution, you also ran into your own story, right? And realized that you had a message that needed to get out into the world pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, there have been a few moments like that. The very first one happened in 2007 when I was helping a bunch of entrepreneurs get their projects done. I was helping new authors make sure that their content was powerful and polished. And then I had a mentor, God bless her, know what she did. But she asked me one day what book I was going to write. And I was like, I'm not writing a book. Like, if she could see my life at 27 behind the scenes, like behind this smile that I was really good at, she wouldn't have been wanting me to try to help anybody with a book. Like, what was I going to help anyone with? And so, it was an excruciating moment, actually, to be asked, what value do you have to give to the world today, and to not have an answer. And so fortunately, as I was bawling my eyes out on the way home, I remembered a moment that I had witnessed with Aaron not long before. So it's 2007. He was about 4. And sometime a year or so before, we'd had this moment where he he faced off with his really angry great grandmother. And one thing that I had told everyone in his life from the beginning was, you will never, ever, ever call him bad. Like, if I hear that, you do not get to hang out with this child ever again. Like that, it was that level of, people make bad choices, but they're not essentially bad. And that was like one of those messages that I had to get through to this kid to free him up from the stories that had limited me. And so she called him bad, and he looked at her and he was like, I am not bad. I just made bad choice and I'm sorry. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, trying to figure out what value do I have to give to the world. I have this memory and I realized, like, oh, I've been messaging my kid pretty powerfully. Maybe that's it. Maybe I could help other parents deliver more empowering messages to their kids. And yeah, that was the beginning of stepping into a whole new life. That was the beginning of, how do I get my message out? Meeting a teacher from The Secret a few months later, learning how to facilitate transformation, and going on my own healing journey before I could actually write Upside Down Mommy, which is what came of that initial idea of the book series. And the Upside Down Mommy, I had to write in 3 weeks because we were having a year, a very awesome, huge growth year. And because one of my other mentors and clients he had called me telling me that his doctors had given him 30 days because his cancer had come back. And so all my best laid plans of how I was going to get my book done and do all this, like, everything went to the back burner. But I still had these big events planned, and I still promised launches, and I was still on radio shows telling people I was going to get the book done. So all said and done, I had to write that thing in about 3 weeks. And it
I didn't see you for 3 weeks. I still remember that time.
That's not true, actually.
Well, okay, that's not true.
We went to Disneyland twice during those.
Did we?
We did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I just remember you sitting outside writing, and I was like, hey, Mom, you're like, I'm writing. Like, I'm in the zone.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, for me, doing that in 3 weeks, I had to get buy-in from everybody. I had to, ask the people in my home for support to do the things that I just did not have time for. And I also didn't want them to hate me at the end of the 3 weeks. So we negotiated and decided that 2 trips to Disneyland was going to keep everyone happy while I was submerged in the busyness. So
Let's just do a little caveat and be clear here. This 3-week deal happened because you had already done the work,
yes,
and it was just about being able to put it on paper.
that's right. In
And
fact,
yeah.
yes. Thank
Not
you
trying
for
to give
saying that.
anyone the wrong idea here.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that. No, who was that? One of my clients said this not too long ago. I got an email and said, "Wow, look at how fast you wrote that." And he was like, "Yeah, I think I did it in like 3 months and 2 hours." Right? Because it actually only took him 2 hours to actually do the thing, but it was 3 months of processing and working through the stuff. And so for me, I always say, yeah, I wrote it in 3 weeks, but I really wrote it in about 6 years and 3 weeks, because it was 6 years of very deep internal processing, healing work that allowed me to move through it. And even after all that work, I was still calling Teddy like, "Oh my gosh, I was just writing and you won't believe this detail I remembered in my story." Like, I remember, pacing the labyrinth and having to, process it so I could go back and finish the story. But yeah.
Oh man, did we talk about healing a story? And it almost sounds like one, but
We all know better than that.
so we all know how your clients, come to you. Can you share a little bit about the story and sometimes why clients come to you? Like, why did I come to you? You were going through something.
Yes. Yeah. So
I think this is a good segue. The story behind the "You Can't Make the Story Up" story
right.
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah. So this year, this is we're recording this on November 1st, 2021. That's right, right? We're in November now. Okay, good. And so as we're recording this, we are also recording a bunch of other podcast episodes with people who have been clients and are now friends and are now collaborators with us in a book that we're releasing in January called "You Can't Make This Story Up. What if it's all happening for us?" And so one of the things that I wanted to do through this collaborative book, this inspiration that came to me, was I really wanted, like I've shared here for the podcast, was I really wanted other creatives to understand, like, the creative process is no joke. And there's a reason why it's hard. And it might be that there's a story that needs to be addressed. It might be that you just haven't had that one person into your life and give you the answer that you needed just yet, right? And we can't force timelines. And so I invited 19 people. I invited 24. I don't remember exactly the final number that we have, but we have all of these people who've written their stories behind the stories of what it was like to actually complete a book or launch a business or develop a brand or create the curriculum and get it out to the people who needed it. And, it's this beautiful offering that these collaborators have given, sharing their stories behind the stories. But the second part of this project that was really, really important to me was my perspective, because for 12 years now, I have been working with people, well, 15 years, I have been working with people who, from where I sit, were literally inserted into my storyline at the exact right moment. I'll give you a few examples. I was really, 2006, super distressed, can't figure out what I'm doing with my life, but I have this, knowing that I have more potential. And then Ursula shows up, and the name of her business is Potential Quest, and she needs help writing curriculum about how to unlock potential. You can't make that up, right? Not too much longer after that, I have a referral from a woman named Darlene Merkler, who she's not in this book, but she's writing a compilation with a bunch of people in her network because she helps elderly people get placed. And so she helps caregivers figure out how to take care of their elderly, financial, legal, like all the stuff that you got to deal with. And so I'm helping her with this project, which is, it's beastly because you have 20 different voices in a project trying to figure out and how to organize it and make sure that it works and the timelines. And I remember reading it and thinking like, why am I working on this book? And then a year after that, my grandma gets ill and I was living with her and she fell and she needed more support. And holy crap, look, I had a resource guide that told me exactly all the players that I needed and prepared me emotionally for what was coming. So across time, when you look at my career and all the people I worked with from my perspective, the people who have been placed in my life have been the catalyst for my personal healing and business development process. And so in this book, people share their stories, and then I share my experience of why they were put into my life and what their presence and their message did for me. And the hope is that other coaches who are struggling, because this is not always pretty, right? Like, sometimes we have these little wrestling matches, and sometimes they are like full on story collisions that happen where I have someone enter my space who is really, really challenging something core in me, some story that really needs attention. And I think that happens for a lot of other coaches, a lot of therapists, a lot of helping professionals, that people enter their lives with this gift of a story that triggers their story, that opens up this opportunity for healing. But if nobody knows what's happening underneath the surface in the invisible realm, then everyone misses out. Those people walk away not being helped. The coaches and therapists walk away without their own stories being healed. And so, yeah, the hope is that people will begin to pause for a minute when those moments happen with their coaches or their clients and wonder, what else is trying to happen here? How could this be happening for us, not to us?
I found the same thing to be true in reading the books that I was given to read. I mean, it's really, you can't make this stuff up. Several, like, it was mind blowing. Like I had been called, I felt called to change my name. And I fought with it. I fought with it and fought with it. And had argued with God, like, because it always came to me in my quiet time. So I knew it was like a divine calling. And then I had gotten okay, I have the name. But then several different ways this I'm not even sure how to say it, came into me, and I'm like, okay, I need to look them up. And it was all about the lettering, and like the way I had spelled it wasn't going to work. And it was just like, this is woo woo. I don't want, and so I kept fighting. It was like a year. And I had just fought that morning in my quiet time, like, this is stupid. And she sent me a book to ask me to read it. I didn't know what it was about. And the whole book, I started reading it, and it was this woman's story about being called to change her name, and what she went through and why it was in value and what happened, the change in her life. I totally forgot what I was supposed to be doing and read the whole book, like just read it through, and chills and chills, because she was telling my story in so many ways. And so, yes, I mean, story collisions, we come into each other's lives, our stories come into each other's lives right at the right moment. Sometimes they trigger us, because there's something in there that we need to heal, or they confirm, they speak to us, they heal, they bring us along on our path. It's really amazing. You just can't make the story up.
You really can't. It's just
That's
impossible.
one of my favorite parts about reading other people's stories, is there have been so many instances like what Teddy mentioned, where my story has collided with theirs, and it's been just the right answer in that moment of what I needed. So I'm grateful for that opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Teddy never told me that she was thinking about changing her name. Like, I never knew this was a thing for her until I sent her this book, and she was like, okay, just finish that book and I got to tell you something. And I was like, are you kidding me? How long have we known each other and you haven't mentioned this? And people say that all the time. How did you pull this group together? Because they're just all so obviously supposed to be working together, like in cohorts when people meet up for retreats and stuff. And I'm like, I hands off. I don't do that. I just trust that the right people are going to be sent to me at the right time, and they're going to be with the right people. And sometimes that means absolute magic, connection, ease, like support. And sometimes it means a nightmare retreat. Like sometimes it just means like being bunked up with someone that you just are wondering why they keep talking to you that way. It's like, what is that? Well, that's because they have a similar story as you, and you two being in the same room, all of a sudden you're pushing on each other's stories. So yay, surprise. But if you don't know that's what's happening, you just think, I hate this person, I'm leaving this retreat.
I was like this with somebody through my whole process, and I could never remember their name. Could never remember their name. Precious. But
At
there
least
was,
you weren't calling them the wrong name.
no, there was story collision like going on, that everything was easy for her. Easy. Every part of the production was easy. It was just, and mine was, I seriously, we worked together and roomed together for months at every retreat and could not remember her name.
Yep. True story.
True story. And our messages were basically the same.
Mhm.
If you think about it, I didn't even realize it at the time. I remember Amanda saying, oh, we got the title for so and so's book. we got the title for her book, and Amanda was so excited and blah blah blah, and it never, like, it wasn't registering with me. And it wasn't till actually years later that I realized, oh my God, I should have had that name for my book, and we had the same message. It was funny.
It was. And I mean, we've become more attuned to that over time, right? Because the first few run-ins, we didn't know what the heck was happening. And we were just like, oh, wow. I knew what was happening for me because I had been in programs where I had been supported and kind of paying attention for that to happen. But in between, that was the other whole dynamic. And but it's made us better at being clearer with people what's really going to happen here and what they can expect and what is possible if they actually lean into it instead of run away.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that it's important for people to understand that this is like a holistic commitment, right? To an integration, a true integration of all the different parts of their lives, because the second they go to heal something, everything gets shaken up.
Oh yeah. Everything that's connected. So if you think about like some of our core primary wounds that happen they usually happen when we were little, right? And so we have this story about who we are, and that shows up in every area of our lives. It shows up in academics, it shows up when we get into career, it shows up when we're building relationship. Like it's part of the other story. So for me, when I started to learn about, you know, like neuroscience and understanding how these stories get wired together, I'm like, oh, that's what's happening. People, I'm supporting people and getting to a core story that needs to be seen and witnessed and healed. And that core story is connected to the relationship problem that they're having over here, the financial partnership problem that they're having over here, and the, you know, and so of course it feels like an absolute shit show, really. That's what it feels like to the client, because they're like, I just started working on a project and all this stuff happened. Of course, I'm not going to keep working on that project, but it's actually perfection, because now we understand, like, if we can get to this story, then all of those things start to resolve, because we show up differently in all of those areas. But it's just not fun to go through. Not fun at all.
It is not fun. It is not fun. I have to tell you, something that happened. I just remembered it. The whole story behind something I keep doing. Woohoo! I was in the middle of the production, and the upside down and the resistance was amazing. So it was time for our company's picnic, and it was happening at Knott's Berry Farm, and I had broken my tooth off in the front. So we're on the log ride, and you know, I'm in the front, and we're going down the log ride, and you know how they take a picture of you as you're coming down the final descent. And when I stepped into the little area where they have the picture you can buy if you want, I'm like, oh my God, because I'm like this, resisting. I'm pushing back, and I toothless. It was horrible. But everybody behind me had their hands in the air with big smiles on their face. But all I saw was me, and I said, oh my God, that's so ugly and embarrassing. And I walked out. But as I walked through the park, you know, my live-in life coach started saying, that's what you're doing. You're resisting, and everybody else has got their hands in the air and they're having a good time. And that became my theme through that whole process, is like, oh, just gotta woohoo, woohoo. You know, like every time it would hit me and I'd want to resist, I'd go, woohoo. I started singing upside down again. Just can't wait to be upside down again.
Yep. And I mean, that stuff happens all the time. Looking through all the chapters in this book, you can't make this story up. I mean, how many of those things do we see where someone was hearing me say something and hearing me ask a question, but not quite getting it in that situation. And then all of a sudden, these other things start to happen in their world that kind of force them to ask that question themselves and get the answer. You know, it's like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like the most incredible rescue mission, really, to help us reclaim ourselves. It really is. The creative process is just all of the things that are unseen, that are happening, that are being apparently perfectly orchestrated for us to really get it. It's mind-boggling. And I hope that's what people walk away from this book feeling, is like, whoa, if that happened for those 20 people, then what are the chances it's maybe happening for me too? And I just have been looking at things from the wrong perspective, thinking that they were the worst things happening instead of part of a bigger plan.
Happening to you instead of for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
That feels like a pretty solid ending.
Yeah.
That's a wrap.
Yeah, that was a wrap right
awesome.
there.
All right. Well, thank you for going easy on me for this first interview. I'm just playing. That was awesome. I appreciate it. And thank you all for listening to this first episode of Sips of Story and Sanity. If you like what you heard, we hope you'll continue to tune in. We do have those 20 authors. Those will be our first 20 episodes. And of course, you're seeing some of them right here as well. So you'll be hearing their stories behind the stories and their episodes. And so we hope that you'll tune in and subscribe, maybe leave us a review if you're excited about what you're hearing. You can also find more details about this upcoming book, You Can't Make This Story Up, What If It's All Happening for Us, at truetointention.com. That's a wrap.